Most healthcare owners only think there is one way to exit out, and that is the corporate buyout. But I'm here to tell you there are multiple ways that you can structure your exit, all that are going to be very beneficial to you, your employees, and the community. And we're going to show you how to do that right now. So stay tuned. Practice owners, tired of working hard but not seeing the financial results you deserve? I'm Eric Miller, and my best-selling book, How to Become a Financial Beast, is your game changer. Learn how to maximize profits, pay yourself right, and build wealth outside your practice. Download now for free. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Financial Beast podcast. As you can see, I am remote today.
Where are you?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to just tell everybody where I am. I mean, I don't want freaking stalkers, finding out where I am,
Understandable.
You guys start questioning where I'm at all the time.
I know where you're at.
So,
or maybe I think I know where you're at.
I'm just going to keep it a bit of a mystery.
Okay.
Just so everyone can, kind of guess. But I think we're going to do that. So in case you guys don't know who we are, Chronologic's financial advisors, we serve healthcare owners and associates. We make sure that people that are treating patients get their money right. And we do that across multiple industries. And we've been doing it for a long time. So I kind of feel like we know what we're doing when it comes to that. You can certainly check us out at our website at chronologicsfinancialadvisors.com. And I encourage you guys to make sure that you're sharing this podcast because we really do deal with pretty direct topics related to practice ownership. So forward it to any healthcare owner or associate that you know, and chances are we're going to address some of those topics. So exiting is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do it a little differently, though, because we're not just going to talk about the traditional exit, which I think has been 95% of what we've seen over the last 7 years, which is a corporate buyout.
Yep. Corporate private equity, just a big buyer.
Yeah, a bigger buyer. So we're going to talk about two other ones today where they are the other two options that most people just quite frankly, they say they kind of want to do all the time because I don't want to sell to big bad corporates.
Yep.
Until they stick a check for $7 million in my face. And then, it's funny how principles go out the window. And
I don't think it's, I don't know. I wouldn't say principles. I think that's a little harsh.
Might be a little harsh.
That might be a little harsh.
Fair enough.
I think it's more so in a lot of cases, unfortunately, it's as simple as need, right?
Yeah.
If my, if some doctor is going to give me $2 million and corporate's going to give me $7 million, it's a lot of times people just need that 7 to retire.
It's true.
So,
all right. I retract that last statement and my attitude.
You should apologize to everybody who's listening to this.
I just apologize right now for that. That was mean. It was not in the spirit of fostering goodwill.
He's on, you're on a vacation and you're mad. I can see it.
I wouldn't say mad.
And I wouldn't call it a vacation either, but
yeah, I definitely wouldn't call it.
So anyways, yes, we're talking about selling your business, your practice, and we're talking about selling it to an individual. And for most cases, that individual is going to be one of two people. It's either going to be another local competitor who wants to buy up your market share or expand their footprint, however you want to describe it.
Yep.
And of course, the other option is, or the other person is an associate, someone who works in your practice, buy it out, take it over, keep it private.
Yep.
So
let's do the first one, which is a competitive, a competitor.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be necessarily someone in your community, but it could be someone that is more regional, that is just like buying up practices in your area.
Well, I had a
Um,
vet who she sold her practice a couple of years ago, and I want to say the couple that bought it, they were doctors, but they were moving to the area and wanted to acquire a practice there.
yep,
So it wasn't really like competition buying her up, but it was,
they were just moving there,
yeah,
right?
they were just moving there and they needed practice. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, I'm even thinking of people that just, look, are kind of the intermediaries. They have multiple locations. They kind of have a leadership team that is already established. They're a little bit more sophisticated than just like a 1, 2, 3 doctor practice, or someone that has maybe like,
Yep.
8 to 9 therapists in a practice doing $2 or $3 million.
Yes.
They've scaled at least maybe like 10 or 12 locations and are just looking to add to their portfolio.
Yep.
But they're not like necessarily, they're not backed by a private equity group.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking
You
about.
see what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
So they're definitely out there. And I think so how typically would a sale go with them? For the most part, what I've seen, number one, they're going to want to buy at least 51% of your organization. They're
Yep.
going to want control. And that's generally what I've seen, is that they just want to have control, but they want to keep you there. And I think this would fit people that want to grow and that are still in the game, but
Yes.
just aren't good at hiring, establishing leadership, goal setting, really big expand. And you know what? Not everyone's built that way.
No,
You know?
no, they might be great at treating, but they're not great at growing a business.
Yeah,
And they're basically partnering with someone who is.
that's right. That's all you're doing. You're partnering with someone that's really good on the systems and management and leadership side.
Yep.
Okay. And I've seen plenty of people that have, for whatever reason, it's not their thing. Like, they're good at getting new patients in the door. They're good at treating new patients. They're good at like that part of it. They have excellent goodwill,
Yep.
but it's the other part. It's the growth and expansion. They're just, and quite frankly, the financial management of the money, they don't have anything to do with.
Yep.
At all. So
Very true.
if you're in that position, like if you're like, close to burnout and retirement, that's not really a strategy, I don't think.
Yeah, no, this isn't something that you do to exit in a year. This is something that you do, probably for a 5 to 10 year exit would be my gut,
Yes. But I think that going that route, like if you still want to grow and stay on, instead of selling to corporate who will say the exact same thing, well, we can do that for you. But they really don't.
Yeah, there's a way to do it privately as well.
Yeah, they really don't. So, in that case, now valuation wise, you're not going to get the same valuation that you would get from a big private equity group.
No.
So, let's say that a private equity group was giving you like an 8 multiple. Well, I think in a deal like that, you're probably looking at more like a 5 to 6, somewhere around
at
that.
Best.
At best. If you have
at best.
If
I was going to say 3 to 4.
It could be, depending on your profitability and your practice and, all the things that need to get fixed. But in that
I
case,
guess 4 to 5. Yeah, 3 to 4 is probably a little low. 4 to 5. Yeah. I think I want to settle up.
Do you want to apologize to everybody for your,
well, I was kind of just thinking about private sales, and I wasn't really thinking about like a big buyer in a private sale. So it's a step above.
It's a step above. So I think that is, but again, there's a lot of good that can come out of that. You can grow, you can expand, you can start other locations, you can really do your thing, but you don't have to worry about, it's almost like hiring a management company for like real estate. You don't have to deal with the tenants, toilets, and trash. In this case, you don't have to deal with, a lot of employee issues and benefits. You don't have to deal with payroll. You don't have to deal with, I think those things that all you have to do is make sure that you're, training your associates and your providers really, really well, that you're producing
Yep.
and that you grow. And look, you can sell your practice to them for a 5 to 6 multiple. And I can assure you the game for them, 8 to 10 years down the line is to sell for a 9 to 10 multiple.
Yeah.
So it really can be a great strategy if you find the right strategic buyer in your industry of someone that's doing that.
Yes.
And it doesn't take that much to do. Okay, then the other option I think is
Internal,
is just an internal sale,
which is
and
generally going to be to another associate or therapist.
yeah,
Although I did have one a couple of years ago where it was owned by a doctor, and then he sold it to his associate and his office manager, 50-50.
okay,
It's kind of unique, but it was still an internal sale. I mean, it really doesn't matter,
yeah,
I guess, at the end of the day. But yes, an internal. So
yeah. So internal sales, which look, if you're in a position where you don't need the practice to sell for top dollar to fund your retirement, and you've taken care of your stuff along the way, and maybe you own the building, and you'll have that as a rental income source. And I guess my point is where you're like not forced to have to sell the practice for top dollar,
yeah,
to retire well.
I think if people had the choice, if people had the financial freedom,
Yep.
I would say 99% of our clients would choose to sell to an associate over corporate.
There's no doubt, and this
No doubt.
actually is going to be the only solution for a lot of people that only have one to two doctor practices, or maybe only have like maybe 4 to 5, therapists or providers on staff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, single doctor, low therapist count practices are not going to be attractive to corporate. So
they're going to get to a point where they just draw a line where like, no, they probably already have to some degree.
oh yeah, they're not buying single doctor practices at all.
No.
So you've got to find an associate or someone to buy you out. So
yeah, so the process of that is I wouldn't say it's like painstakingly difficult to do.
no, I'm actually guiding a client through it right now.
Okay.
Yep.
So the associate then is what? It's obviously going to be someone that wants to take on the responsibility of ownership.
Yep.
I'm sure that you've learned a thing or two along the way. Well, let's okay, in this scenario that you're talking about right now, is it going to be how's the financing going to work?
So he's selling his practice to his associate. She is actually approved by the bank to get a loan for the full amount, which is nice. Because a lot of times seller financing is required. The banks a lot of times won't loan the buyer enough funds to pay 100% in cash. But in this case, they are. So she's going to buy 100% of the practice. He still owns the real estate, so he'll collect rental income on her for, I think it's 5 or 10 years, and then she has a right to purchase the building at that point.
Yeah. So okay. I mean, in that case, it's going to be a pretty simple transaction. And that owner is going to be able to get a lump sum of money, which would be good for them. And but I don't know that you necessarily have to do that. Like people that feel like, well, my practice is, let's say I do have a decent practice that's maybe 2, 3, even $4 million that I'm not going to sell to corporate. I mean, there's no way an associate's going to be able to qualify for a loan.
No, I had another one a couple of years ago, a doctor who sold to us. He had 3 doctors on staff plus himself.
Yep.
And all 3 doctors bought him out And instead of going to the bank and getting a loan, they're paying a max amount a month for the next 15 years.
That's amazing. See, I don't know why more people haven't thought about this.
Well, obviously there's a risk of default. That's probably the single biggest reason right there. If those
there's no,
doctors can't
yeah,
pay.
there's no doubt about that. But okay, I mean, if a practice survived for that long, I'm going to assume that some of the principles should. I mean, I think you almost have to intentionally try to screw that up.
Yeah, but you never know what the next owners are going to do. Are they going to come in and try and reinvent the wheel, or are they just going to keep the gas, keep their foot on the gas and change very little?
Well,
and you would hope for the later.
This is the first law of doing a transition like this.
Yep.
Okay. And you know this. All right.
I'm very aware of this.
The first law is don't change a freaking thing.
Yeah.
At all. Okay. And that's the only reason I've seen, other than someone was just kind of hell bent on destruction, is when someone comes in there and just starts to try to change everything that the ownership was doing before, that led to a successful practice and a successful transition. That doesn't mean you can't improve upon things.
Of course. Okay?
But initially, you don't change a thing. If that doctor met with patients for 15 minutes, you're meeting with patients for 15 minutes. Okay. Yep. If that doctor was using XYZ bank, you use XYZ bank.
Yep. Keep the hours the same, the staff the same.
The hours and the staff and everything was the same. You keep everything the exact same.
Yeah, you can make changes eventually, but
totally
you gotta,
and you will. But and all you're trying to do now is look at like what leads to this success, and you can make some changes along the way, as you get accustomed to the practice. But initially, do not change a thing.
Yeah, don't rush to make changes. That is going to result in, I don't know if I want to say failure, but it's going to result in a reduction of income, no doubt. Most
absolutely.
of the time.
So I think the transition can certainly be done really well, and that allows. So to go back to the seller financing, if you do a 10 or a 15-year seller financing, again, you can still stay on if you want to as a I don't know,
associate, pretty much at that point, or even as a consultant.
Yeah, you can maybe speak on behalf of the practice. You can do community relations, PR, whatever that would be, just to make sure everyone knows.
Or, the other thing too is these new, like in that example I just gave, these 3 doctors that took it over, they don't have any ownership experience. So they're going to have questions and need help, and that's fine. But, you can charge for that because you're consulting them as an owner at that point,
it doesn't have
you're not going to nickel and dime them.
No,
it's not like,
it's not going to be a ridiculous amount of money, but at least it allows you to stay connected to the practice and see, and protect your income stream, until they kind of get their feet underneath them to do that. But you can charge an interest rate on the money, and right now it's probably anywhere between 6 and 8%. You can probably charge. On something like that, which is
pretty accurate.
Which is a pretty awesome return that you're going to get on the money, and obviously it spreads your tax liability, over that amount of years. I mean, you still got to pay 20% on the money that you collect every single year, but it's still, there's benefits to that, and I don't know why a lot of people aren't doing it. They just kind of shy away from that. I guess it is just the fear that the next person isn't going to do very well with the practice. And
that's exactly what it is. But
I would kind of encourage more people to do that. Then they're like, okay, well, where are they going to get the money to at least put a down payment down for the practice? All right.
The bank, family, savings they might have.
Yeah. I mean,
They can come up with a down payment.
if you kind of even know along the way that you're going to sell to a person, let's say you want to sell to someone in 3 years.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing you could do is that person could say, you know what, instead of my bonus, maybe I get a bonus or I get, a certain level of my production. Why don't we set some of that aside, instead of recognizing it and have them set that aside to then be able to fund the down payment or an acquisition of shares or something like that. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. That's a good
So
idea. I never even thought of that one.
Yeah. So, instead of, let's say every quarter they get a $25,000 bonus or something like that, or based upon their production. They say, you know what, I'm going to put 10 of this, towards my future buyout.
Yep.
So that way, when the time comes for them to start buying in, the money's already there.
Mm-hmm.
The money's already there. And that allows them to buy in without having to stress about finding a down payment. Is it money that you could have had, but, and done something with? Maybe so. But, if you really believe in the practice and you really want to buy into it, then that's your funding vehicle right there.
Exactly.
So there's just a lot of different ways to do this. And I just think people need to get a little bit more creative.
And the one thing that I do want to point out too, in a seller financing situation, one thing that you have to be very careful of is that as you receive those payments, you're investing, some or all, whatever percentage is necessary. Obviously, that's something we would figure out, but you're investing some of the payments because, if you sell your practice at, say, 65 on a 10-year seller finance, and you just spend that money, by the time you get to 75, that payment ends and you haven't put anything away.
That's right.
And yeah, I'm sure you have other monies that you saved over the career, but you just burn through your entire practice sale in 10 years.
Well, that would definitely, be an analysis that would need to be done prior, that you would know what your burn rate's going to be, what you want your burn rate to be.
Yeah, this is not something you figure out after the fact.
No. Many people have tried to do that, but I think we've all learned that owners people overspend after they exit their practice.
Yep.
No doubt about it. You're going to spend more money than you think that you're going to. I've seen that.
Yeah. The first year to two is always just like that. And then spending usually starts to curtail down. But every client I know who's sold definitely spent more in the first year or two than they planned on.
Yeah. 100% they spent more.
Yep. Gotta get that kitchen renovation done, you know?
I need this, need that. Someone has a great idea for an investment that I wanted to put money into. It's just,
I need to buy a tractor. I took up farming. Yeah, there's always something.
It's pretty wacky what happens to people when they first get it. And I get it, but
too much free, I shouldn't say too much free time, but a lot more free time than what they've been used to for the last, 4 to 5 decades most of the time. So I see why.
Yes. So that's why I would definitely encourage people to make sure that they're going to set aside a lump sum of money that they're just going to spend and blow, and make sure that money's not required necessarily for their cash flow or their income. But yeah, it's certainly it's an interesting phenomenon to see. We can probably go on and on about exiting, but and we probably will, because there's always different topics that we could talk to, but. Don't think that you're just hamstrung with having to sell to corporates. There's definitely other options that you guys can do. There's funding. There's different funding options that you can do, and and I think one thing I do want to tackle next too is structuring your sale. In terms of trying to minimize your tax liability as well.
Yeah, we can talk about that next week.
That'll definitely be a topic I want to talk about.
I like that. I think people would like that as well.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, we'll stop there. Everyone have
All
a good
right.
one. We'll see you guys in the next
Enjoy your
podcast.
tropical vacation.